Hello here from Graz, from the Steiermark Presse Club. I'm here again and I'm very happy to be here again to promote Austria's NATO accession. And please mark my call, I'm always calling for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Please support our cause, please support your native Austria to join NATO, and that Austria is ultimately an ally like America. Together we will be much stronger, and that should be the logic of the answer of Europe to this terrible war of aggression which Russia is waging against all of us economically, fiscally, industrially, and of course militarily in Ukraine. And the answer must be more unity of Europe against Russia. And this should be the logic. We have this very important summit now, with Ukraine being officially EU candidate and starting the negotiation. That's a major breakthrough. Let's not forget, I personally was fighting since 2016-17 intensively in Kiev for exactly that cause, and it seemed impossible. Now this debate is won, and I'm sure also the debate about Ukraine's NATO membership will be won. Together with the war, ultimately there will be liberation of Ukraine, and this will happen in 2024, and all my other predictions will also come true. So situation is, I still have in the Austrian case, it's of course the most difficult debate in many ways, because here neutrality is entrenched in the 1955 state treaty, and it's also in the brains, mentality, mindsets of the Austrians. But on the good news, me as activist, I have been able to collect 6,500 signatures already in the last year. And I need, and that's of course a challenge, I need another 2,469 signatures from you, dear listeners, from all Austrians you know. Please support Austrian West integration, the security of Austria, the freedom of Austria, and the sovereignty of Austria. Because contrary was the FPÖ, the Friends of Putin in Austria, always claim that NATO would be an infringement of sovereignty. In reality, the state treaty and neutrality was an infringement and is an infringement on our sovereignty, because we are not allowed to join a military alliance. This is of course a very big restriction, because all other countries in Europe can do that and have done that. Because now, with the exemption of Malta, Cyprus and Ireland and Austria, everybody is in NATO, and there is a reason for that, because it makes a lot of sense, and that's of course sovereignty, that you can decide your alliance status. If you are a kind of under the curatelle of the superpowers, which ultimately the state treaty is, then you cannot join alliances, and you are very limited in your sovereignty. And that's of course what is the status of Austria. So if you want a sovereign Austria completely in the West, out of its free choice, then please support NATO membership. And we also have to end the state treaty, because that's also the logic, that we need a new basis for our sovereignty, and that's of course the EU membership and the NATO membership, and also to build a new identity for Austria based on these two major parameters. Yes to NATO membership, of course, in 2024. That is my aim, and I campaign as well in Ireland, Cyprus and in Malta for exactly that reason, and that is what we should achieve: the security, the freedom, the sovereignty. And I need more signatures to be campaigning for that, and I'm sure there will be the breakthrough, because Austria will be changing. This kind of insistence on a special Austrian way has led to this massive anti-European sentiment, which we unfortunately do have in Austria, and there is absolutely need to change that, because it's absolutely disgraceful that we have the worst results in the Eurobarometer polls. Now we are the most anti-European country. And why it comes, I want to explain it, why it comes. Because it comes from this neutrality thing, because it somehow puts ourselves on a very distant, not really membership status. We are somehow very different to the rest of the Europeans. We are neutral, we are more for peace, we are more for wisdom. We have some deeper insights into the situation in Europe, and that's of course all not true, because we are simply total normal European Union member states, and we should behave like all the others also to be in NATO. And the ballast of the historic kind of connotation should be left behind, and we have to really face the reality of the 2023-24, now soon it's 24. I'm here at the end of, or mid of December 2023, and we definitely have to join NATO. That's the logic. Yeah, in the core of it, neutrality is immoral, it's irresponsible, and it is against European solidarity, and it must be ended now. And this is also true for Kosovo, for Bosnia, for Ukraine, for Austria, for Ireland, for all countries, for Cyprus. And this is what I'm campaigning for, and ultimately also that the European Union is joining NATO. That's very important as the next step of our statehood, of our development towards a political Europe, to a geostrategic Europe. It's very logical that we have, after all these challenges, and we have come quite a far way now with joint military financing, with joint military procurement, and with a lot of positive responses towards the war by Russia against Ukraine, and all of us economically. We have, of course, gone a very, very positive far way, and we have risen to the challenge, but the next step is then the membership of the European Union in NATO. Yes, I'm coming to the Austrian case, and this will be the centerpiece of my press briefing here. The balance after 2 years of war, because next February we will have 2 years, and let's not forget we are basically in this constant war since 2014 and ultimately since 2008. And when the Georgia invasion happened and then the Ukraine invasion in 2014. But now in these 2 years of full-scale invasion, we have in the 6 sectors which I have defined what means a Zeitenwende, this epoch shift. And this is basically the security debate, the enlargement debate, the energy debate, and then of course how much military support for Ukraine, and of course in the debate about Schengen. And this is also very important. That means all these issues about enlargement of Bulgaria and Romania, and about our Balkan politics, we have basically failed. Yeah? There might be now some improvement on some of the sectors. I will discuss that in this briefing. But in generally, what really needs to be done and where would be the logic response and the responsibility of Austria is, of course, in the NATO membership debate, because Sweden and Finland did it, and that is, of course, the logic that we should do as well. And also then to support Kosovo, Bosnia, Ukraine in NATO. This is their security, and this is so vital for them, and so we must support that one. And also when it comes to that's of course the NATO debate, which was stopped by the Chancellor, which is a kind of outrage by itself. And you see the strong control of the Austrian media and society, politics. Once the main parties stop a debate, it's really not happening. I was very happy that at least in the Standard there was last week a mentioning of my activities and the debate, and Salzburger Nachrichten have also covered them. But it is really fundamentally the debate has stopped because simply they don't want, and so it's not happening. And FPÖ is against it, SPÖ partly as well, and so everybody is against it. And in the special session in October, even they declared neutrality as the highest level of state reasoning and the principle of the state. When it comes to this kind of confused argumentation, I feel I'm almost speechless. Because, of course, the highest level of the values of the state is freedom, human rights, democracy, and our republican values, and not neutrality, which was imposed on Austria by Stalin as a price to withdraw his troops in 1955, which in the meantime I think everybody really should understand, and that is really very clear to everybody who is in goodwill, that this is the historic fact of the reason why Austria has accepted neutrality, because also in that time we didn't want to be part of the Soviet bloc or of a Soviet bloc-free world. We wanted to be part of the West, and we were more or less a member of the West whenever we were not allowed full sovereignty due to the Russian troops just being in Czechoslovakia, ready to strike, which they did 1 year after the Austrian State Treaty in 1956 in Hungary, and then in 1968 in Prague, and the rest is history. Yes, in the terms of what I call the trade policy, of the EU trade policy, let's not forget, Austria is still today the most protectionist country of all European Union countries, and that's very unfortunately against Mercosur, against Australia. We have really had very little progress in the von der Leyen Commission on trade policy, and most of it was inherited, and even that was inherited was not really very much promoted, because the Mercosur contract would be ready to adopt, but we have decided against it. And Austria still is an Alpine protectionist kind of blocking power in all the developments. And the logic, of course, when we decouple from Russia, we must open to America and to the other parts of the free world. Austria is not ready to support them. So we can really say that our trade policy is a fundamental problem for the European Union. And the third point is the enlargement politics. We have been really not very helpful here. And still it happened, historic decisions were taken now at the summit, so we must evaluate that, even when Austria was not in favor, and still is under the carpet. There will be a lot of resistance and some quid pro quo with many topics which are much more concerning than Austria, but historic decisions have happened. Ukraine is now a EU candidate and will start the negotiations, same for Moldova. Georgia is now EU candidate. All the things I wanted since I came to Ukraine in 2016, I started my campaign for EU 37. They are now going to happen. Sadly, Austria was not able to defend Kosovo and get Kosovo into the candidate status, and now we have only Kosovo is the only potential EU candidate country. That's really a bit bizarre that we are in that situation. Of course, Kosovo needs also the full candidate status, and of course Serbia must be isolated for its support of terrorism. And that's we will be discussing as well, because the situation is very, very fragile in the Balkans because of Serb pro-Russian policy. Now after the re-election of the SNS party, we are in a big political crisis here. Then we have, of course, the energy politics, and Austria again is here not really decoupling from Russia, and that's very unfortunately. Our energy transition is basically stopped, and we are importing as much Russian energy as before the war. This is very unfortunate and must be investigated and stopped. Again, like in 2022, I call for a complete boycott of Russian energy and a complete phase out of gas and other imports into the European Union from Russia. Actually, a complete boycott of trade with Russia is the only logical consequence, because you shouldn't trade with the enemy. Russia is the enemy, and we have seen that very clearly in all their actions in 2022-23. And of course, we have delivered no concrete military items towards Ukraine, and we are one of the few countries, together maybe with Hungary and some other few unfortunate countries, but most of the countries have. And Austria has military assets, trucks, dual use. We have 50 tanks, 57 tanks, yeah? We don't need this old Cold War Leopard 2 tanks. We can deliver them to Ukraine, we can buy new tanks and then have a real modern army. Of course, which I'm campaigning as well, a professional army, no military draft and no kind of obligation to serve, but a real military army which can be used and deployed inside the NATO framework. That is the future, and of course we need also to give concrete military help to Ukraine. This is very important. This is the fifth dimension, and then the seventh dimension is of course the Schengen veto and the pro-Orban policy. There is now some small movement here in terms of air Schengen, that at least the air borders will be integrated and open for Bulgaria and Romania. Yes, that's some concession, but what is strategically the most important is the land border between Romania and Bulgaria, and of course here the mobility would matter the most. That the two countries are a bit antagonistic, and then they don't really, they are happy to focus on the air travel. But economically, the goods transport between Romania, Bulgaria and Hungary, of course, and of course the movement of people and the supplies for Ukraine, this is all very important to move forward with that. So full membership in Schengen is the strategic necessity, and this has to happen now. Yes, I have been, of course, campaigning here intensively, and I call again the Austrian parties to be ready for the end of neutrality on now the 21st. I always postpone the date because they are not doing it, but I'm campaigning here for the end of neutrality in a four-party consensus session on the 30th of January 2024. And I'm of course campaigning here also to prepare the Austria for this very hard war winter, which will ultimately see us victorious, but it will be still very complicated because Russia will push back very hard militarily as they do, and also economically, and they will escalate war by war, which they are doing already in Israel, Caucasus, and in the future in the Balkans, which they have of course been instigating the Banska terrorist attack, and they will continue to do so. Yes, the four parties, which are pro-European parties in principle, the Social Democrats, the Christian Democrats, and of course the Liberals and the Greens, should of course abandon neutrality, cancel neutrality on the 21st, on the 30th of January in a special parliamentarian session, and that will be the logic of changing that, and then the road is open to for Austrian NATO membership. And that's the logic of my activities. It's also in the framework of Austria, Ireland, Ukraine, Moldova, Bosnia, Malta, Kosovo. All countries should be in NATO because that's basically our security, that's about the security of Europe. NATO is ultimately about the freedom of the European continent, and we all should be in that, and we should be in solidarity. And that's what I'm campaigning internationally and in Austria now since the start of the war. And I have been actually quite successful now on Twitter, on X. I have this platform here now developed to 54,600 followers. And I have also these recent successes in the Salzburger Nachrichten with some big statement, some confrontation, neutral or not. And also in Standard I was mentioned, and also of course I think one of my best activities now was at the Austrian National Neutrality Day, the 26th of October. At the Heldenplatz I raised the NATO flag in front of the governmental tribune, and they all saw it, and it took about 5 minutes for the military police to identify me and to ask me kindly to remove the flag, but the point was made and it was also covered in the media. And I'm very happy that I made the case. In the framework of my international activities, I was really very active now in Serbia, Bosnia and in Russia, and also there a lot of the opponents, I would call them, if not enemies in case of Russia, they have taken notice, and I was very well covered in the Russian Channel 1 in a long TV show with my activities, and both Dodik and Vucic mentioned me in their electoral campaigns as their opponent. So in a way it was an honor for me. My campaign, of course, I do self-financed as I'm a development consultant and a management consultant. I lived in Albania, Ukraine, Kosovo in the last 15 years, and I'm now back in Austria, and this is one of my free activities actually. I have also the opening of the labor market and the free trade agreement with the Americas. USA, FTA, please sign also these agreements, and it's all in one context to see in the Ukraine West integration, Austrian West integration, the Balkan West integration, of course more unity, and of course common European debts to fund victory and war and integration of the 9 new countries, and of course simply basically more unity as an answer to the Russian war. And also more European strength, because we should also be able to defend ourselves in solidarity. Also we must spend 2%, maybe possible more, depending how the war is going. We must support Ukraine more, and we also must take more responsibility, because there is no reason why the Slovaks, the Romanians, the Bulgarians have to defend the Austrians. And that's what they are doing, because of course the danger, the threat level comes from Russia or Iran. And then the countries further to the east of us have to defend us, and we are not contributing neither financially nor militarily, but say it's okay, you can do it. That's of course very unethically, and that's of course immoral. In that case I made very much, because I base the NATO membership case on moral questions, and moral questions of solidarity, of also the morality of Austria basically staying aside when there is danger and there is concrete war. And it's nice that we are not morally neutral, that at least has happened, but we are still, you know, militarily neutral, and that's completely unacceptable. In a short nutshell, we have of course more than 12 reasons why Austria should join NATO. of course, Austria will be more secure, and we also contribute to our security ourselves. Yeah. We have also NATO standards and the reform of the Austrian military, which is both very important, and also the reform of the Austrian secret services according to NATO standards. Then, of course, NATO is the real solidarity in the European Union, because we are together a political union, so we need also to make that case and to also contribute to that solidarity, because what is the EU about when somebody attacks, for example, Estonia, and we don't help them? So that would be really very wrong. So NATO is simply normal in Europe. It's also an important argument. Some people say, oh, we can do it separately, but we are not investing in our own security like the Swiss. So we have basically been free riding. So the situation is everybody else is in NATO, so get the hell into it as well. It's the logic of that moment, because why to have own way forward? So we have also NATO membership of the EU as the next step forward. And then also very important, NATO is anchoring the United States of America in Europe. That's very important, because as you have seen in Ukraine, there would be no free Europe or free Ukraine without the American fast, decisive, and also the capabilities of America. They have saved Ukraine, and we couldn't have done that. We can only contribute financially, but when it matters, the Americans are there with us, and of course, joining NATO shows the Americans that we really appreciate that kind of support, and we should. Then, of course, the security of Kosovo and Bosnia, and this negative example which Austrian neutrality always puts forward for Serbia. So, yes, neutral Austria has basically done nothing for Ukraine in 2022-23 in terms of real concrete help, in terms of military. It's okay, there was of course some solidarity with the people, but that's something everybody can expect, and that's of course in such a major historical crisis necessary. But the real thing is real weapons, and we have failed here. So we have delivered no weapons, no tanks, and of course we have always hidden under this very latent and very virulent Austrian anti-Americanism and this pro-Sovietic myths, and this needs to be confronted as well. Yes, and we have also to join NATO to reduce the massive Russian influence in Austrian politics, and this end of this myth of Austria being a bridge and all this kind of philosophical ballast which we have accumulated in Austria over the last 17 years. And we need also to develop a new state identity as a European member state, and no more as a neutral kind of something out there. And that's ultimately the point. And of course, Austrian neutrality is immoral. It's against European solidarity and is reckless, it's irresponsible, and it must end now. Thanks a lot for listening, and please, when you have Austrian friends, make them sign, ask them to sign kindly, and also support Austrian NATO membership. It's simply completely normal to be member of NATO, and that's what we all should do. We should be in solidarity, united, and that will make us win this war. And of course, Slava Ukraine, support Ukraine, because ultimately it's the Ukrainians fighting. We must support them, and they must win. Winning means liberation and NATO membership and EU membership, and it will be. Budmo, Slava Ukraine, and thanks a lot for listening. Bye from Graz.